I am from Ogidi. Ogidi is a town in Anambra State, and where Chino Achebe comes from. I like to add that. And I was married to a man from Enugu. Enugu is also in Anambra State, like 20 minutes drive away from where I come from. And each time people ask me, before my husband died, I always got the question, you are not a widow, what are you doing with widows? It took me back to 1979 when my mother died. And I was practically moved as a moving from Enugu, where we were residing, to Ogidi to live with my grandmother. Because I am the youngest child, and every other person was in boarding school, and I was in primary school. And I needed extra feminine guidance. But I used to regret ever moving from the city because I lost the excitement of wearing cortina to school, white socks, looking clean. And then in the village, you meet children going to school without sandals, and you appear with your sandals, and they pour sand all over you, trying to intimidate you. And then the first shock was attending a funeral of a man with my grandmother, watching another woman break a bottle of beer to shave her hair. And then she had to sit on the floor, as in not mat or mattress, on the bare floor. And late 70s, early 80s, not like the rug, the carpet that we have now, bare floor. And I felt that was strange, but growing up in a home where I was always told to keep quiet, you talk too much, you want to know everything, just shut up, shut up. So at that point, I had gotten used to shutting up, but I couldn't. I asked my grandmother, and she said, I knew you were going to ask. Keep quiet until we get home. And then we got home, and she told me things that I couldn't sleep. I was terrified. The widow didn't have a male child. And she was eventually sent out of the family. And at that age, I started being worried about getting married. I'm praying for God to help me to have a male child when I get married. Because I thought that male child was like a license not to sit on the floor and not to do all those strange things that I witnessed. And when they were shaving her hair, she was bleeding on the skull, using bottle. So I passed through all of that. I witnessed, my grandmother was everywhere and was like a community leader. So she was attending almost all the funerals in the community. So like a handbag I attended each of them, but I didn't know that God was preparing me for something. And along the line, I started stealing her food because she had so much. She had bags of rice unopened, she had beans, she had 2 bags of yam. People, my uncles, my dad, everybody. But then I had widows that lived close to my school, the high school I attended, and they didn't have food. So I started stealing. I use the word stealing because when you take what is not yours, that's what it is. And I didn't know she was keeping tabs. She knew what I was doing, but she kept quiet. And one day she said, look, I am also a widow. So don't just steal from me and give to them. Steal from them and bring home. And so she locked up everything, and then I started stealing her clothes. I just needed to do something, but I didn't know what was driving me. And one of the days I asked a family friend who is a lawyer, I said, what course do I study to be able to help widows with what I was seeing? And he said law. And fast forward, I got admission to UNN, political science. English, I said no, I must read law. The second time, political science, my father said, you are wasting in the house. If you don't go for this, you get married. And for me, getting married was my husband dying and going through all of that. So anything I needed to do not to get married and lose a husband and go through what I witnessed. So I went in for political science and eventually switched over to law. And the very first case I handled as a lawyer was the case of a widow from Akbugo. Akbugo is in Enugu State. Enugu State is in southeast Nigeria. Her husband died. Her name is Mary Annie. And she was accused of killing her husband. And they did a video of what they put her through. So some members of the community brought the video to my office. Then I was working with an NGO, Women's Aid Collective, founded by Mrs. Joy Ezilo. They brought it to my office, and what I saw traumatized me. By that time, I was married. I had 2 kids as at that time. My husband was still alive. And I saw the man's corpse on the floor in the bedroom. They washed his palm and gave her the water to drink. And she drank it to prove her innocence. And then they put a piece of palm, kola nut, kola nut, orji. And then she picked it up with her lips from the palm of the dead man. And then they brought a day-old chick, like a chick that was hatched that day. I don't know how they got that. And then they used the chick to make incantations and wipe all over the man's body. And then they severed the head from the body and gave her the head with the blood to swallow. And that was it for me. I said, no more. I'm going to go all out and do something. And from that point, I never knew I was going to go as far as I went, but we went to court on her behalf, the Federal High Court, for her fundamental human rights and all of that. Eventually, the men in the family that did this to her started dying. One of them was bitten by a snake in the farm. One of them fell from the palm tree. And you know how superstitious our people are. They said, oh, it's the dead man. And they made peace with her, returned everything. And I was able to get an organization in New York to help us with $1,000 to pay her rent and to bring out her children from the village school where they took her. After that matter, I worked with that organization for 5 years, and I felt it was enough because it was traumatizing. Every day I prayed for my husband not to die. If you ask me to submit a prayer request, my first prayer request was, I don't want my husband to die. At a point, it was too much, and I resigned. And then after resigning, I don't know what happened again, I registered Healing Hearts Widows Support Foundation. And along the line, I said to myself, I can't keep waiting for men to die, their wives maltreated, they come to us and we provide help. It's like treating symptoms of malaria. So we decided to get to the very root of it. And part of the things we are doing now, sadly, my husband was my first financier and the major funder that we had. Each time I said, oh, darling, we need to, I say, oh, okay. The day the money finishes, it's up to you, you go hungry. And he kept supporting us. At a point, he would give us a loan, and then he would demand it and make my life miserable. At times, I'll pay, at times, I'll blackmail him and then escape from payment. But he died 2013. In January, he was hit by a drunk Navy officer in Abuja. And people thought, oh, nobody will bother her, nobody will disturb her. She's been in this for 12 years, she's known, she's on TV, she's on radio. But I came face to face with an accusation that I was always traveling. Yes, I travel a lot, but I made sure that there was food in the house each time I had to travel. But the accusation was that, oh, I was feeding my husband on biscuits. So when the vehicle hit him, he had no strength. It was an SUV driven by he was drunk. He told the Navy secretary that he hit a tree. It was that bad. So, a lot of things happened, a lot of strange, funny things happened. And then when it got to the point of hair shaving, I said, I'll shave my hair because my husband believed in it. I want to do it as an honor to him. But don't use razor. That was a problem. And I insisted, if you don't use scissors, and they said, you don't talk when it's done. I said, you don't tell me what to do with my mouth. I say what I want to say. It was like back and forth, and everything ended. And people said, stay off widows. Your husband died because you help widows. But I can't. And so in the past 2 years, it's like we've doubled what we've done. We were able to get funding from Mama Cash in Netherlands. Till date, I don't know how it happened. I applied for 5,000 euros. They wrote back and said, increase it to 15,000. And now we've been able to do a lot of advocacy. And then the US consulate in Lagos, I don't know how they got to know, but they said, oh, somebody told us about the work we are doing, and they gave us money. And then another group in New York, Virginia Gildersleeve, things started opening up. And it was no more the family funds of money from friends. And we started this advocacy, which we are running now, which a lot of people are not comfortable with, because we are working with the traditional rulers, and you know how strong they are back home. And then we started working with the churches. Assuming my priest goes up to the pulpit to say, don't maltreat a widow, I think I'll listen to him more than listening to Chigozie. So now we partner with them, and then we train them on the type of sermon to preach on wedding days. Because back home, they're always emphasizing on submit, submit, submit. They're not addressing the in-laws at the wedding. They're not addressing the members of the family to ensure that the woman is protected even when her husband dies. So we did this in 2014, last year. No woman should lose her rights because she lost her husband. We produced this, and then the major thing we started doing, which the government almost didn't approve, was to simplify the laws, because there are laws, but a lot of the widows are ignorant of the existence of the laws. And even when they are aware of the laws, the legal English in which the laws are written, most times they are not able to understand. So this is the third of the series. This is the Enugu State Widowhood Law. I brought copies. This was funded by Mama Cash. We have the Anambra State Widowhood Laws, simplified, funded by the US Consulate. And we have another Enugu State Widowhood Laws, funded by Virginia Gildersleeve. And what we do with these laws, they are in simple English, they are in Igbo language, they are in Pidgin. What we do is to run community outreaches and work with traditional rulers, and then what we call town hall meetings. We just devise all sorts of names as long as we get the message across. So that each widow, we have like 20,000 copies in all. Each house should have this. And then whether you are widowed or not, because you know this slang back home, the religious slang, it's not my portion. I don't know whose portion it is to be a widow. When you try to talk to a woman whose husband is still alive about widowhood, to teach her to take precaution, she tells you, it's not my portion. And then her husband dies, it becomes her portion, and she wants to move the portion to me to handle. So what we want to do is to sensitize them, to also know that their marriages should be registered, to also know that they can actually be co-signatory, to also know that there are things they can also do, and they can become independent. The era of housewife is gone. I don't know why a woman should be a housewife and not do anything. And those are the worst set of people to work with, because when the man dies, they don't know where he has accounts, they don't know anything. And so this is under the legal literacy series or legal outreaches that we run. We run medical missions, because some of these harmful traditional practices, like they can ask a widow to cry every 5 a.m. We intervened in a community in Ebonyi, in Enugu State, a 18-year-old widow, kept in a farmhouse, 25 minutes away from the family house. All alone, she was breastfeeding. They took the baby away from her, and she was left in that farmhouse, assuming a snake beat her, assuming something happened to her. And somebody informed us, and we had to go there with the police, with the Catholic priest, to rescue her. And she was mandated to cry every 5 a.m. in the morning, whether she felt like crying or not. And if she didn't do it, it was a problem for her. And then, the same plate, like the local oko, any Igbo, you know oko, the earthenware. From the very first day she entered there, they used the same plate to give her food without washing it. Those things were not going to bring the man back to life. So why humiliate the woman? And when we rescued her, we took her back to Sokoto and did her letter of administration to be able to take over her husband's property and manage and take care of the children. Currently, we have the case of a girl that married at 13. Her husband died when she was 19. And she has 4 children. And the family insisted she must leave the family compound. It's no more whether you have a male child or a female child. The greed and hatred is increasing. They want the money, they want the building, they want the property. It's very sad. I have a male child. I have a son that is 16, that is in high school. But I know how much I fought. I wasn't even fighting on Nigerian soil. I was in New York. I had a baby 2 months after my husband died. The baby was in the intensive care unit at the Cohen Children's Medical Center in New York. Back home, estate valuers were counting the rooms of my building that they were instructed to sell. So I was there in NICU, and we spent 6 months in the hospital before she was discharged, and I took her back home to Nigeria. And I came home to all sorts of meetings. Money, where is the money? Where is the property? Where is the this? Where is the that? Imagine a widow that is an illiterate. Imagine a widow that has nobody to speak for her. At a point, I told them, I said, I will go to Sun newspaper, and I already have a caption. Enugu widow activist in battle royale with her in-laws. I said, I'll go to any land, I'll blackmail you. I'm not trying to remarry. You girls who say get married, I'll make sure you don't get husband. I had to go that far to get them to leave me alone. And now I've been left alone, and I've started doing what I enjoy doing. Finally, the young girl, her husband died at 19 with 4 children. For people like that, they don't just need the legal support. They don't just need the rent that we help them to pay. We also provide free interest loans, but they need the medical support. A lot of widows are hypertensive. I have my records back home. We run medical missions with doctors from the teaching hospital, about 9 doctors permanently on our list. And we check the BP, we do, I've learned all sorts of medical jargons. I've become, a quack nurse, as we call them back home. We check their protein in the urine, we check, one morning a widow with blood sugar of 423 was queuing up in Enugu City to eat a plate of jollof rice and 1 piece of meat at the medical mission. Why is your blood sugar so high? She ran out of glucophage and Daonil. How much is glucophage? 250 a card. How much is Daonil? 100 naira a card. That level of poverty, I hate it. And so what we've decided to do is to run 4 major medical missions every year, and then we keep drugs 24 hours in our office. If you're a widow, some women that are not widows come to us and say, my husband is alive, but he's as good as dead. Treat me as a widow. And we treat them as widows. It's not our business. The important thing is for them to be alive. Because if they die, their children go through hell. So we run that medical mission, and then we run the spiritual angle. We have pastors that are volunteers, because a lot of widows believe in witchcraft, that their in-laws are after them to switch them off. We use that language, switching off. We don't want to say die so that it won't sound silly and funny. Whatever, but we just do switch off. Are they switching you off? Yes, go and meet Reverend Wachuku. And then they pray for her, and you see her glowing and happy. So for me, whatever works to keep a widow alive, let's just do it. And apart from the medical missions, we've had cases where we met widows with bad situations, and they were referred to teaching hospitals, and we had to pay. So there are several interventions. We are not so cast, in such a way that this is what we do, we can't do this. We come up with innovations every day, because Igbo society, I'm sorry to say it, I'm an Igbo woman 100%, we don't treat widows right at all. Once the man is dead, right now I am handling a matter. The woman almost fainted when I told her I was going to London, and I said, don't worry, I'll be back on Sunday. And when I realized I'll be back on Wednesday, I called her, I begged her, I said, nothing will happen to you, I'll talk to the police, they will protect you. She has a daughter. Her husband died after being sick for 2 years, and her mother-in-law beat her up. I was there, and accused her of killing a man that had kidney problem. I don't know the connection between the incident. And now they are trying to take away a block of 6 flats from her. And that's the only form of income that she has. And despite the fact that the husband warned them and said she will stay in the family and adopt children, the elder brother of that man has proposed marriage to her. And on the condition that marrying him will keep her in the family, or else she should leave. And sadly, the judiciary arm of our government just went on strike. So I'm like, what do we do? Because the best thing is to go straight to court. And last year, they were on strike for 8 months, and all our matters were hanging. And now they've gone back to strike again 2 weeks ago. And when I get home, I don't even know what we are going to do. And that's where the strategy of naming and shaming comes in. Because when I get back, I'm going to the priest, to meet the priest that is in charge of the man's church. And then I'm going to meet the community members, and we are not going to talk about the building. We are going to also meet the wife, to tell the wife of the man that wants to inherit a widow that she's about to have a mate. when she terrorizes her husband at night, the man will have no choice than to leave the woman alone. Whatever strategy we need to use, some widows are not able to afford meals, decent meals. For me, the Igbo culture needs to be changed. A woman mustn't marry in the family. One of my brothers-in-law, at a point, the way he kept harassing me, the head of the family asked him, "Do you want to marry Chigozie?" He said no. And then the problem finally is that at times we don't get the support that is needed. The society sees a widow as an outcast. Let me use myself as an example. Because I've had this experience between 1999, when I became a lawyer, and 2 years ago when my husband died, I've heard stories from widows or by widows that their girlfriends tell them to stop coming to their home so that they won't snatch their husbands. So the psychological impact that your husband is dead, and then you cannot mingle with your friends who have husbands, and some of these husbands are dead men that are working. And you ask yourself, like one of my friends, I said, my husband was very successful, he was doing very well. Till date, I don't need to beg anybody. Even if I decide not to work again, we'll be fine. And then I'll leave what I have there to go and take his husband that works in the ministry that earns about 63,000 a month. What is he going? Can he pay for my flight to London? So why should I go for him? I'm sorry I'm going this personal, but I just needed you to understand some of these things. They ostracize them because they think they will snatch their husbands. And then they go through all that psychological, all those problems. And you ask yourself, within the family, you go home, your brother's wife tells you, "Oh, you've been married out. That your husband died does not mean you should come back." Now you are in your husband's family, and they try to tell you what to do and what not to do. And then the society thinks you killed your husband. And then the government will not help you because even when you go to court, the cases are there for 5 years. Adjournment, I'm a lawyer. I know what I'm talking about. Adjournment every month. Before you know it, they're on break for 3 months. Before you know it, it's Christmas, it's Easter. It runs that cycle. And even when you get the judgment, how is it enforced? And even these laws, they've been there 2001, in Enugu State, 2005 in Anambra State. Imo State is on their own. Ebonyi State has got their own. Who is implementing? And when there's judgment, who ensures there's judgment? And then I wish you would get copies of the law to read. And when you look at the penalty, how can you ask for penalty of 5,000? Making the law laughable. So for a widow, it's better to go to God in prayer and fast and use your candle and use your night vigil and appeal to God to attack a man that is dispossessing you rather than to go to the laws. Because what would the law give the person? 3 months imprisonment or 3,000 naira fine. That's absurd. I want to appeal to you. I know you live in London, but you have families back home. Do something. Speak out. I use Facebook. I've raised money on Facebook for widows. I'm very active on Facebook. I take cases to Facebook. This naming and shaming thing, I do it on Facebook. I put up pictures. And just before I left my cousin's place this morning, I got a message from the lawyer that does our cases in Lagos. A widow from my hometown with a son. 7 trucks belonging to her husband were sold without letter of administration, without any transfer of title. But a judge from Yoruba, a female judge, gave us an injunction order stating that nothing else should be sold. And from what we discussed this morning, those guys might end up in Kirikiri, even if it's for one night. And then I'll pop champagne and I'll be happy. God bless you.